fascinating to think about a career in data. And I feel like people may still have some worldview about like a 1950s accountant and tables and spreadsheets and numbers. The things I love about data aren't the data itself. And the things have sort of driven the decision making along the way. So the things I'm passionate about are like transformation, innovation, psychology.
With that abundance of data, what are the main barriers to sort of turning that into actionable insights?
The first phrase that springs to mind is like the signal from the noise.
Tracy Moore, a seasoned leader in data and AI and the general manager of AI and data with MYOB. With 26 years of experience, she's been instrumental in building and leading AI and data teams to drive real impact. Her career spans many organizations like Skandia Life, Barclays Bank, ANZ, Teradata, Deloitte, KPMG, Xero, and Telstra. Beyond her corporate leadership, Tracy plays a key role in shaping the future of AI as a member of the National AI Center think tank and an advisory board member of the MIT Sloan School of Management. Today, we're diving into some big questions. Have businesses truly tapped into the power of big data? How can data storytelling bridge the gap? And with AI chatbots dominating the scene, what's next for ethical AI? So Tracy, thank you for joining me today, and welcome to Tales from Tech Titans. We've been researching your background, and I think you've had a really action-packed career, and I'm really looking forward to learning a lot more about that with you today. There's also three themes that we kind of picked out that we thought were really interesting, specifically in your background, that we'd love to unpack. So the first one is that general theme about building a career in data and AI. Secondly, the secrets of being a good storyteller, the kind of numbers, the narrative, so to speak. And then thirdly, I guess leadership in data and AI. And I guess what's keeping you awake at night, for good reasons and bad reasons, but what's on your mind around those areas. Before we get to that though, let's kind of roll back a little bit. And I saw that you started your journey with a degree in marketing and economics at Strathclyde University, before you then moved to look like into programming, a bit of project management, and then you kind of found yourself where you are today in data and AI. What can you tell me sort of about your early career and how you kind of got into tech?
Yeah, it's fascinating to think about a career in data. I still have that moment when you meet somebody at a barbecue or like a friend of a friend and you try and explain, I work in data.
Yeah.
And I feel like people may still have some worldview about like a 1950s accountant and tables and spreadsheets and numbers. And I try and explain that the things I love about data aren't the data itself. And the things have sort of driven the decision making along the way. So the things I'm passionate about are like transformation, innovation, psychology. And if we come from that kind of angle, then maybe the decisions are a little easier to explain. So I finished my degree in economics and I knew I didn't want to be an economist.
Why's that?
I think it seemed fairly dry, and the feedback loops were these are words I know now, I probably didn't know then, but all of my friends and colleagues who went to work for government or consulting firms had these huge time horizons, and there was no way of knowing if the work you were doing was actually having an impact. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I thought technology was kind of cool and exciting then, and I still think the same now. That's like the innovation and drive for change. And I came across this, like literally it was an ad in a newspaper. That's how old it was. And it was a Swedish wealth management firm. And their policy was to hire technology undergrads, like to train in programming, who had no technical background. So any sort of arts degree. And that was just the thing for me. So we had this big grad selection program, and they sent us off to live in a little bunker with IBM for 3 months to learn a program IBM mainframes. And so that was just everything I wanted it to be. It was a great team, it was hard problems, it was learning, it was innovating.
Oh, wow. That was Skandia Life.
Yeah.
Was that based in Scotland? And the reason I asked that question is, here's a fun fact for you. My hometown where I grew up is Southampton.
Yes.
Which is the head office for Skandia. So I know Skandia very well.
Yeah.
Strangely. Did you move? Did you relocate to Southampton with that role, or were you kind of based up in Scotland?
So yes, that was the office in Southampton.
Yeah.
Because I've finished economics and I didn't know what I wanted to do, I literally had some friends in Bournemouth next door to Southampton, and I moved in with them for the summer because people who know the UK know that's as close as you can get to decent weather and beach life. So I was living down there. I saw the job, Skandia.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so you joined them as a programmer. Were you a good programmer?
Yeah. It's hard to kind of, how would you answer that question? I loved the role. I got to progress across lots of different things. So I tell myself that was good rather than just, I don't know, being impatient and shuffled on to the next thing. I think the piece where I went from like programming to anything that would feel like data this was sort of early 2000s, and Skandia, like lots of financial services companies, were building their first ever website.
Yep.
And again, like lots of FS companies, they had grown through acquisition. So behind the scenes, there were dozens of brands and different back office systems. And when they went to build their first website for people to do really basic self-serve, like change your address or update your policy in some way, then the whole thing was just a schmozzle because the back-end systems were so messy and disjointed. And so the first project there, or the thing they needed to do, I guess, was to stand up a single customer view.
Yeah.
And as a, early career programmer, like I don't know what a single customer view was, but I knew the idea of building the website was really exciting. It was the first of a kind. And I knew I wasn't in the website team. So how could the team that I was in, this kind of back end, like IBM AS400 team, contribute to all the cool customer self-service digital stuff? And so maybe that was the beginning of a career in data, was just thinking about what needs to be true in the background to create beautiful, seamless online experiences.
Yeah, interesting. And as you say, kind of, if you position that in I guess the history of technology, I guess it was when companies were starting to move away from those mainframes and start to look at e-commerce and web platforms and really start to harness the power of the internet as a customer experience. Did you think in any way your degree within the marketing and economics kind of helped your thinking specifically within that role?
Maybe a little in that role, but definitely more and more as the years have gone on.
Yeah.
So the way that I think about all kind of data, analytical, AI, applied analytics, whichever frame of decade we're looking at, then really the thinking, like economics is the science of decision making. So under constraints, how do we make decisions? So when we are thinking about how to innovate and how to go to market, or how our customers might react to a certain nudge or a certain intervention, then that grounding in economics has been really helpful.
Yeah, interesting. So it's even going back to what you said earlier, you mentioned psychology and passion around transformation. There's still sciences.
Yeah.
Right. You still have to better measure the impact of the variable you're changing, and that's what you're talking about, isn't it? The customer experience is affected. How do you measure that?
Absolutely, yeah. And it was really difficult back then, and it's really difficult now. But the thing that I think is a waste of time and I get cranky about is not trying.
Is not what, sorry?
Not trying to measure. Just kind of, I think this comes back to the thinking about innovation. There's a near infinite number of things that we all want to do, in a commercial context. So many of these things are unknown. We need to try things and see what works. And not starting from a basis of what we think we're trying to achieve, and just the most basic, capture a baseline and see if we can all debate for hours about, control groups and correlation and causation. But people who just do stuff without even thinking about what we're measuring just feels a bit wasteful.
It's also easy to kind of retrospectively say, oh, well, I did this and this happened to suit your own argument as well. Was there a key moment when you decided tech was going to be your career? Do you remember a pivotal moment?
I honestly think I was probably going to, like, seeing the ad in the paper and going to the grad recruitment day where we played with Lego and just it was so opposite from economics. It was kind of anything is possible, felt like the atmosphere.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, interesting. I love the fact, by the way, that you talked about seeing the ad in the paper. I've got the same experiences myself from that kind of time. And I read something somewhere where there was a prediction when job boards first came about, and it was saying that essentially this was going to be the death of the recruitment industry. Yeah. Actually, the data shows it was the death of print advertising, because the Thursday newspaper job section, the paper used to be this thick, suddenly went, and all those ads kind of went online. Which quite an interesting sort of. It just seems so strange though now, doesn't it, to get and I remember it. You'd hunt through. Anyway, let's talk about data. We kind of got touched on a bit. I read that Kendra Vance actually described you as being a wickedly good storyteller. I don't know if you saw that comment from Kendra. So I'm just interested, when you think about data storytelling, why is it important, and how do you kind of construct that narrative?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think some people sort of think about data storytelling from the sort of first principles. I'm going to look at a data set and see if I can figure out what it's trying to tell me. I think what Kendra meant when she said that was we spent a lot of time of our careers working together across a couple of different roles, which I'm super grateful for. I think what Kendra has seen me do a lot of is build investment cases around building data analytical AI capabilities. Yeah. Like, how will our business performance be different if we invest in this stuff? Yeah. So it's really thinking about how the nuts and bolts of, collecting, analyzing, enriching, building insightful applications on data, how that changes business performance. Yeah, okay. Are we playing catch up with something somebody else has done? Yeah. Or are we trying to innovate and show up for our customers in a way that others aren't?
So how do you turn that into a compelling story and get people excited about it? Because it logically makes sense, but we know that most people don't make decisions based on logic. It's often the emotional connection.
Absolutely. And, in boardrooms, a number of boardrooms over the years, the conversation has really been about what are the competition doing? And why do we believe we can either catch up and do the same more quickly? Yeah. Or what is our angle? What can we do that they are not doing? Yeah. And so the storytelling has to be backed by facts and all sorts of, addressable market analysis and, sort of bottom-up estimation of capability build. But that is almost hygiene. Yeah. Like, people are going to say yes or no to investment cases based on, like, a perception of competitive ability. Yeah. And I find things like, a story I've told dozens of times over the years, but it is really helpful to kind of illustrate, is when people think about, we have data is an asset, we should go and, monetize, sell, enrich, do something with it. And I find myself an endless number of times in the last decade thinking, the data set that you are sitting with, does it solve some problem that somebody will pay money for? And the story there I like to tell is, why did Google, again, I'm really feeling old in this conversation, why did Google launch Gmail? So did you have a Gmail account when they were first launched?
I'll confess, I only got one fairly recently. I was Hotmail.
Oh, excellent.
So I can,
we all place our bets in.
Yeah.
So Gmail were the first to launch the kind of, was it unlimited storage? I can't remember, but like they were the first to do something bigger than Yahoo or Hotmail or the others. And as a kind of commercial decision, Google have spent however many billions of dollars providing this service to billions of people around the world for years. Why are they doing that? Yeah. And part of the easy answer is like to serve ads. But we don't see a lot of ads. That's not their primary advertising channel, is in our email. And we think about it, and I think this is part of the answer. Like, I've never worked for Google, I don't know their answer, but building the data set they need to do the innovation to launch the next generation of products. So I think some organizations start from a data exhaust perspective. We'll get the data that was produced by some other business process, some other product, some other company that we acquired, and we'll just build on top of that. Whereas I think the leading companies tend to start from first principles and think, what product, what value do we want to create? And then what data might we need to acquire or enrich or foundationally create to be able to innovate in that product category.
So the question I was going to actually ask you, which you potentially just answered, but what comes first, the problem or the data or the problem, the chicken and egg scenario, right? In your experience, which way around does it tend to be?
Yeah, and I think it's mainly the problem. Start with what you're trying to do, and then go figure out, do you already have the data, which may be true, but often isn't. And then how are you going to curate, clean, collect, pick the verb that's right for the situation? But I think, and obviously that's kind of possibly slow and time consuming. So how can you go find some proxy data that you can quite quickly iterate on and learn from?
Yeah, got it. So it's almost trying to find an immediate data set that kind of helps you shape the hypothesis. Again, it's going back to being a science, right?
Exactly.
You kind of want enough proof to be able to continue to the next kind of hypothesis and so forth.
I think lots of people have tried the investment case. Just trust us. We're going to lock some smart people away in a corner, and I've never seen that work.
No. Kind of with the storytelling theme. I read somewhere, saw some research from the Business and Professional Communication Quarterly, that well-known publication. And they did some research, and what they found in the kind of where we are now with AI becoming, I guess, so much more prevalent, that they found that verbal communication skills were kind of predicted to be a much more valuable skill in the future. I think 72% of people said that it was going to be more important, whereas written communication was going to be less so. And I was just kind of interested to get your perspective on that. Do you think that is that something you're seeing right now?
Fascinating. So you just said two things popped into my mind when you said that. So the first is, but AI is now multimodal. We can all deep fake everybody's verbal comms. So I think things like that may be true for a period, but at the moment the tech is moving so quickly that things like that maybe won't endure. And the other thing I thought was, I probably spent, I don't know, maybe the first 5 or more years after moving to Australia trying to sound less Scottish.
Oh yeah.
And failing miserably.
The
only thing I learned was to speak Scottish more slowly. But an old friend years ago said, like, why are you trying? Your unusual, memorable accent is a bonus, stick with it. And that's something that I've always kind of wrestled with. And I know, my way of measuring how effective all of these note-taking apps, so Otter, Firefly, Copilot, all of those transcription ones, is like how they deal with my accent. So they're improving noticeably.
Yeah, interesting. It's funny the things that we become more conscious of as we move around the world in the way that we communicate, I guess. I guess when we think about storytelling as well, it's not just a key skill within data. It's a key skill or soft skill within leadership, I would say, more broadly. Again, is that something that you've kind of experienced or something that you've worked on as you've gone through your leadership career?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm a big believer in authenticity. And I think early in our careers, it's easy to sort of focus on the work and be very practical and task oriented. And because, nobody has invented any more hours in the day, and sometimes there isn't as much time for relationship building conversations as we like. So sometimes I think real authentic storytelling is just a better way to really get to know your team and really get to a place of trust rather than, endless small talk. My current team, we had like an offsite thing the other week, and part of that was about storytelling. Like everybody's technically very competent, so we chose to focus a couple of hours on storytelling skills. And the way that we got, I think it was 10 of us around the table, and the way that we got to know each other in that 2-hour period was just so much more impactful and deeper than anything else we could have done together.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was listening to a podcast this morning, and it was someone who is I don't know if they're self-professed or they're seen as a global expert in communication, and they were saying your ability to tell stories and your ability to communicate is probably one of the single biggest factors on your success in life. You can have all the great ideas, you can have the best resume, but if you can't tell the story, it's going to be a hindrance to you.
Yeah.
Which I thought was quite, I never really reflected that way, but it's very true.
Yeah. And, getting cut through when everybody's bombarded with ideas and content and stuff.
Yeah.
So the stories will just get more important.
Well, and bombarded and information stuff is actually, that's where we are, right? The amount of data, the abundance of data that we have today in the world is, I've got no measure for this. I'm sure you've got probably more measure than me, but it seems to be enormous. There seems to be endless data. I heard actually a great metaphor a couple of years ago now where I heard a chief data officer say, everybody wants their data to look like a lasagna, but it looks like a spaghetti bolognese. And it was such a brilliant, simplification of imagining and being able to picture that. And it always resonated with me. But they say no one will ever get to the lasagna. They all hope for that, and you can pitch what you want.
Every vendor's architecture doc ever looks like a lasagna. It's so good.
With that abundance of data, what are the main barriers to sort of turning that into actionable insights?
The first phrase that springs to mind is like the signal from the noise. Where to start. So I think if we start with the data, then we'll drown. Whether, again, pick your metaphor, is it drowning or quicksand or sort of, is it the Red Queen and you run really far and you get nowhere? So I think you have to start with some sort of strategy question.
Yeah.
Are we trying to catch up? Are we trying to get ahead? Are we trying to, acquire customers? Are we trying to retain customers? Start there. And then you have at least a path to sort of framing a question and experiment and then trying to move forward. I think there needs to be some level of belief, but also lots and lots of proof points along the way. Yeah. I think if you start from, we have this data, what are we going to do with it? That's, I was going to say a guaranteed failure. You're never guaranteed to fail, but it's much less chance of succeeding.
Yeah, it's interesting.
How would you know if you'd succeeded or failed? We started with some data and then we ended up with some more data.
That's right. And what were we trying to learn from it? I think it reminds me, and I say this all the time on the podcast, so I do sound like a broken record, but probably my all-time favorite business quote is fall in love with your customers' problems, not your solution. And I think that it's kind of what you're saying is what I'm hearing here, which is fall in love with the problem, not the data.
Absolutely.
I read on your LinkedIn profile when you were at Deloitte, you were engaged by a major national bank. You didn't name names. I'm not going to ask you to name names. But the success of that project was incredible. It increased revenue by $100 million. I think was the headline.
Yeah.
So either you're an exceptional storyteller on your LinkedIn, and you got me hooked with that headline. But I was just curious. How did they harness data to achieve that kind of uplift?
Yeah, so the underlying story there was the retail bank, and I nearly said it, the retail division of the bank had a new CEO for operating that division. He was incredibly ambitious. He knew, and again, this is about customer centricity. So he had inherited an organization that had a line of business to sell credit cards, home loans, term deposits, you name it. And his vision was, what if we start with the customer's problem? Really, really learn and understand our customers and their wants and needs. And we give them all sorts of service, support, assistance, build a real relationship with our customers.
Yeah.
And then when it comes time to do something that's incredibly profitable for the bank, like give them an offer for a home loan, then the probability of them saying yes and sticking around as a happy customer. So there was lots and lots of don't give them credit card offers, all these little sugar hit sort of product pushes. So yeah, the thing that we ended up building was next best action capability, sort of learn and iterate and execute. And I think in some ways that was one of the pivotal projects of my career. I think the team that Deloitte put together to execute with the team from the bank, this wasn't a kind of doing it at them, it was all together, but really has, I don't know, given me a really strong belief in the power of multi-skilled teams.
Yeah.
So we had scientists, we had engineers, we had design people, we had communications people, we had business process people, we had commercial strategists, pricing people. And so the way to kind of bring together those different perspectives and create a really purpose-led autonomous team was able to achieve some really impressive stuff.
Yeah, amazing. I was reading, or maybe I was listening to a podcast, and it was talking about how Walmart used big data.
Yeah.
And the kind of predictability that they could get to with their customer kind of behaves, almost to the point where if customers noticed it, it became a problem.
Yeah.
They became quite upfront. I don't know if you heard about this story where they recognised their highest spending customers were expectant parents, and then the first year. And they started predicting, they could predict through the patterns of their purchases who was probably pregnant.
Yeah.
And they had some dad come in the store and sort of say, why are you saying this marketing to my daughter? She's only 17. He came a week later and said, I've just found she's pregnant. So it's quite frightening, their predictability of what they could do with that. Is that kind of what you're talking about, just being able to really understand the customer because of you can kind of really see the touch points and the way that they're interacting? Maybe not in the Walmart case, but being able to deliver them really the products that are going to be most valuable in their life.
Yeah, and I think where that, it's almost sort of thinking about it in terms of incentives. So if we start from the Walmart example, then your incentive is to go and sell people, expensive things when they are in quite emotional times.
Yeah.
I think at the bank, there was a very long-term view. Like if we do the right thing for the customer in the moment, then we are trusting that trusted relationship will pay off and they'll buy the really expensive things from us at the right time.
Yeah.
So lots of people kind of thought it was a data project, but it was almost like United Nations diplomacy telling the credit card business unit leader, please don't send these offers to these people in this time. We're trying to kind of
got it.
help them rather than pepper them with offers.
Yeah, well, so that's much more about the joined up thinking about the customer experience by the sound of it, rather than say just the kind of bombardment, so to speak.
Knowing what not to do.
Which is interesting because I think when I was reflecting on today's conversation, I kind of remember 15 years or so ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, there were so many column inches in the tech press about big data. Everyone was kind of talking about it. I remember Gartner once saying it was probably the most spoken about topic of probably 2010 or something like that. And I kind of compare that to probably the noise today about AI and blockchain, right? It feels like a similar moment that's kind of going on. But my experience back then, and I'm sitting outside of this world as opposed to sort of where you are, is that there was a few companies that did big data really well, but there was only a few. There was lots of companies that didn't do it so well. Is that a fair statement?
I think so. Yeah, if we were measuring did it very well by some proxy like sustainable competitive advantage, then I think very few did it well. It comes back to the thing about, big data, like we're giving ourselves a pat on the back for collecting stuff rather than, building things that people love and pay for. So, and I think, I feel really strongly about sort of starting with the customer problem and maybe a little anecdote to kind of explain why I feel really deeply about this. So I after Skandia, I went to work for Barclays Bank in the UK and did data warehousing, and that was a thing. And then when I moved to Australia, I went to work for a bank, and they were looking for a project manager to run their data warehouse transformation. So great job, lovely people, everybody worked their socks off for a year, and then the program got cancelled. And this was more than a decade ago. And I viscerally remember surrounded by, 100 people across technology and data and finance, and the program sponsor stood up and said, well, basically, spent too much, this isn't delivering anything, it's cancelled. We'll figure out what projects to reallocate everybody to. And the sort of crushing disappointment for my team and all the teams around, and this thing that they had poured blood, sweat and tears into for a year of their lives, and that kind of, emotional realization that not starting with the problem leads to this level of disappointment for this many people. So I've carried that one forward as a pretty deeply held belief.
Yeah, and it's interesting actually, because that story as a recruiter, particularly being in the UK at that point in London, I heard many times an organisation saying, sadly, we're going to do a big data project, let's go crazy, they hire all these contractors, they bring people in, and then 6-9 months later, we're cancelling it. We didn't learn anything we didn't know. It was the kind of view of the board or the exec team, and I thought, that's so... Well, maybe what you didn't know is you didn't really have a strategy, is what it tells me, that you got caught up in the wave. And it kind of makes me think about where we are now with the AI revolution. And I guess my question for you, what do we learn from that moment so that we don't make the same mistake again today?
Absolutely. I'm thinking of my current team and all the teams around us, and everybody's so enthusiastic and, pumped to learn about what AI can do to transform their tasks, their workflows, their jobs. And I love this enthusiasm. I'm hugely encouraging of there's no answers in how we adopt and embrace this wave of AI. We need to figure it out. So the way to figure it out is to roll your sleeves up. But bringing it back to this kind of, if you build it, they will come mentality. The conversation I have almost daily at the moment is, how will you know if you succeeded or failed? And then I quite quickly say, both succeeding and failing are great. There's no value judgment, there's no failure is bad. Like, we're all about learning. And the good thing about the crazy hype at the moment about AI is, like, you can't, open the internet, you can't talk to your friends, you can't go to a barbecue without somebody talking about it. So this impetus to learn is fantastic. And when people say, I'm going to do this, like, that's brilliant. How will you know if you succeeded or failed?
So how do you measure success?
It's really like, what task are you trying? And people kind of sometimes get really hung up on, I read this study, said this kind of software engineering task will be 50% faster. And I'm like, well, that's ambitious, But let's say, we might get more or less than 50% in our context. How are you going to measure? Oh, I'm just going to do it. And then what will you compare against? Okay. So I'm really trying to walk the tightrope at the moment with helping people just experiment responsibly, whilst also encouraging learning. I don't want to make it such a high barrier that you don't go and learn. I just want you to pause for 2 minutes and think, how will you know?
I've seen a lot of rhetoric around teams, companies, talking about the number of hours they now spend per week using AI. I think it's pretty interesting for the productivity. As in, are you just using that time to just do the same task, just in a different way, compared to what you do? My favourite reference, and I'm going to confess to being old too now, so I'll make you feel a bit better about yourself. But when I first came to recruitment, we didn't use computers. I still remember sending my first email in recruitment and going on the internet. And then we introduced computers and CRMs and LinkedIn and job boards and clever tools that post jobs and all this kind of stuff. And we're now spending hundreds of thousands, we're a relatively small business, but hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on a tech stack that we didn't 25 years ago. But the actual revenue, if you look at the productivities revenue of a recruitment consultant, hasn't changed in 25 years.
Yeah.
So we're doing all this stuff to not really be more efficient. And it's kind of what goes through my mind at the moment with AI, which I'm definitely not a Luddite, but I'm kind of proceed with caution because I want to see if we start using these tools, how do we get more time back for our consultants to do the more human things that we've kind of lost?
Yeah.
How do I measure that? So it's a kind of constant thing that's occupying my mind. So I was hoping you had the answer for me today because I literally lose sleep over this. So, yeah.
Yeah, I wish I had the answer. Just start by measuring things and then we'll figure as we go. But one case study that I've been sending everybody this week. So I think I can name it. This is a public paper. So Microsoft published lots of claims about using Copilot, GitHub Copilot made engineers more efficient. And these were big sort of numbers on a PowerPoint slide for a while. And then hats off to the Microsoft team. They published this beautiful white paper that said these numbers are based on these 6 studies. And there's the methodology for each of the 6 studies. And for everyone, people might want to poke holes in the methodology and say I could have done better, but I've been sharing that with everybody to say, if you're a bit puzzled where to start measuring, whether it's engineering or whether it's marketing or something else, if you're a bit puzzled where to start, here's 6 ideas.
Yeah.
They're just very simple, but they're practical, and then you can work from there.
Because it is overwhelming.
Yeah.
And probably what's different to, and I kind of revert back to big data or many years ago, the ability for these products to start up very quickly and AI product companies to then start marketing. I know as a business leader, I'm getting bombarded every day with the latest tool and the latest promise and this view. It's very enticing and they're very clever in their sales tactics as well.
Yeah.
I'm interested, and you touched on the Microsoft paper, but as a leader within data and within AI, how do you stay on top of this stuff?
Great question. I think start with humility and admit that you are never going to stay on top of it. I think if I had another 24 hours in my day every day, I would never be across it. So pick some things that are aligned with the bit that you care about. Like I really care about the intersection of AI and economics. So there's some great writers who look at, what productivity actually means and how governments measure it. I look at things about enterprise adoption and innovation. Just find something. There's some people who write on machine learning evaluations and guardrails for language models, but they write in an incredibly accessible way. So I see really good. So pick a couple you care about and then ask all your friends for recommendations.
How much time do you give your team to go and upskill themselves around this stuff?
Yeah, we just refreshed the tech strategy, and part of that is tech skills, knowing that this piece is moving so quickly, everybody needs to learn. So we have a fairly robust 70-20-10 format.
Okay.
So 10% for formal learning, 20% social learning, and 70% kind of on the job practice.
Yeah.
And I think that's more relevant than ever because we could all go and do formal classroom sort of course type things on AI, for weeks and weeks and weeks on end, but it's the application and practice and sharing with your friends and comparing notes where the magic happens.
Absolutely. Well, we're human, we're social creatures, right? And we learn from spending time talking, working on ideas together, that kind of creativity. I also think from a classroom perspective, by the time the content's been written, it's probably outdated.
Yeah, exactly.
It always makes me laugh when I go into Divox and I see books about AI.
Yeah.
I think, well, surely that's out of date already. How on earth can you, I'm sure I'm being really facetious, I'm sure there's some interesting books about it, but it does seem that's probably not the way to kind of immerse yourself.
I mean, there's a handful of authors and books I love and would recommend, but if they're talking about the cutting edge model technique framework approach, then it's out of date.
Yeah. It's probably online, right? It's in forums or someone's got that knowledge. You mentioned the Microsoft paper, but is there any other kind of trend or insight you've come across recently that's sort of really excited you?
Trend or insight? I think maybe a couple of things. So we are big users of Glean, which is like an enterprise search AI tool. It means we can access all of our own data securely and sort of chat with it. They released a feature quite recently that sort of helps you write prompts.
Yeah.
So sort of coaching you through good prompting. So that's just, again, making it more accessible for everyone. I think a month or so ago when DeepSeek dropped, the way that it has the user interface that sort of shows what it's thinking out loud. Yeah. And obviously it's not thinking, and gigantic pinch of salt with that one. But I think OpenAI jumped on that one quite quickly afterwards, so sort of explaining as you go.
Is that, sorry to interrupt, but it strikes me as that's another form of storytelling, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Because you say it's not really thinking, it's just giving you the perception. I kind of love this idea often in business. Sometimes it's about the theatre, the experience. There's again, I've definitely talked about this before, but the Japanese bullet trains, the way the cleaning crews go on and clean the trains is a specific theatre performance, because the feedback from the customers, they didn't believe they could clean a train that quick. Yeah. So they turned it into a performance. And they didn't actually do anything different in terms of the cleaning process, but it made people feel more comfortable with the depth of cleaning. And that's this theatre, right? That's what you're talking about, DeepSeek or OpenAI or whatever it is, showing you kind of what you imagine is going on. Helps you come to terms with it. Yeah,
I mean, however smart the machines get, we are humans, and I think, the pace of brain evolution, we're wired for storytelling and connection. So the people who are working for these kind of consumer AI companies, they are design teams, or I think the real unsung heroes.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also something disconcerting when you put in a prompt and then it pops up with an answer that quick. Yeah. How could you come up with that? Obviously it can, it's got the computer processing as well. So there's maybe an element of that. It kind of makes it feel like there's a thoughtful pause.
Or the flip side, some of the more like research heavy models just in the last few weeks, they take time. Yeah. And, it feels like being on the internet in the 90s and dial up. I have to wait. So, it's fascinating.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Again, it's the psychology, right? The way that we kind of interact with the technology. Another big topic, and one that I kind of sense from reading about your background that is, I guess, quite prevalent in AI is ethics. I can see that you're involved in some committees and so on, and some boards around that side of thing. So what's from an ethical point of view, what is kind of keeping you awake at night around AI?
Yeah, I think probably the way that some of the media focus on, super intelligence and, the Terminator is going to come and get us. Some of that hype around evil is taking attention away from real harms. Yeah. So I think the kinds of harms we've had from the last 20 years of the internet and social media being so prevalent. So polarization, online bullying, scams, like all of those ways that humans can be really mean to each other, we've managed to dial them up incredibly in the last 10 or so years. And I think probably what worries me most about AI at the moment is what it's going to do to those sort of human harms by putting these fantastic tools in the hands of bad people as well as in the hands of good people.
And I think that's sadly been the case for a long time with tech, isn't it? The bad guys seem to be able to mobilize this tech quicker than the good guys. And then you're kind of playing the catch up. It's probably not the right segue, but I was going to ask you your opinion about kind of what's going on with Elon Musk and Grok 3. It seems to be just quite an interesting sort of situation. Just keen to get your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I saw a graphic on LinkedIn this morning about comparing all the big consumer AI products. So, I don't know, Microsoft, OpenAI, Claude, Grok, DeepSeek, and just how much personal data they collect.
Yeah.
And it stopped me in my tracks because I felt like those were separate conversations and it felt like a good idea to bring them together.
Yeah.
And what struck me was Grok was actually at the bottom. And I thought, okay, are they using just obviously X, Twitter, that data set? Is that enough? They don't have to collect extra behavioral location data. From memory, Google was at the top because they collect everything about us anyway, but that's the deal we did for free Gmail and free photos. So, yeah, I don't know what I should say. I don't comment on Elon Musk.
No. That's I was just curious because again, it kind of ties in with that kind of ethical debate, right? With the Indian government kind of saying, we're going to shut this down, then he's threatening to sue them. It just seems.
He seems a very litigious man.
He does seem to be this right. Yeah. I asked you kind of what's worrying you, or ethically, or keeping you awake at night around AI. But what kind of really truly excites you about AI?
I love the kind of pace of change. I love the optimism around what's possible.
Yeah.
Things that were impossible 12 months ago, 6 months ago now are just, my partner and I spent last night in front of the TV, making images of our puppy drinking IPA in the local bar because, I don't know, it was a fun way to compare capabilities with the latest image model. So I love the pace of change, and I think something that's genuinely intellectually fascinating, and I talk to everybody about, is how we all make the right commercial investment decisions when the world is moving so quickly, and how we can make bets about where to build genuine capability without chasing the new sexy thing that gets launched, 3 times a day.
Yeah.
How are we sort of placing those investment bets? So yeah, it feels like a fascinating time to be in the role.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I've seen you've been quite prevalent on LinkedIn. I'm not sure how much of this you can share, but in your role with MYOB, you've got a lot of investment there kind of going on around AI. Is anything around that specific you can share, or what you're kind of hoping to achieve?
We're hiring.
Yep.
You heard it here first. Yeah, we've found, I think, 4 incredible new humans to add to the existing group of incredible humans just in the last few weeks. They're all joining pretty soon. We've got another couple of roles open in market and just trying to find people who have done this before.
So done what? So what when you've hired those people, who are they and what are they going to be doing for you?
So the focus, there's obviously a million things AI can do and we want to do them all, but the primary focus, the strategy, is really shipping customer-facing products that help our small business customers. And so the MYOB motto, purpose, is to help customers start, survive, and succeed.
Yeah.
So how do we help Australian humans, Australian small businesses, or maybe somebody who just has an idea for a business? How can we help them in all the different ways that they might think of starting a business, survive, manage their cash flow when they're running their business, and succeed? So thriving, growing, employing new people. And there's a pretty endless set of things we can and want to do in that space. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's also incredibly purposeful, right?
Yeah.
And you think about, I did have this statistic a few weeks ago, so we were talking about this on another show, but I'm going to say it's greater than 90% of people in Australia work in a small business.
Yeah.
My wife has a small business. Ember's still probably a relatively small business. And you, as an owner, as a leader, you end up doing a multitude of tasks. And that's kind of what I'm hearing, is you're looking at those problems.
Yeah.
How can you solve them, speed them up?
Yeah.
Because most people don't start a business to be good at doing their books. Let's
Exactly.
be honest, unless you're an accountant. But
this is the thing that sort of, the 2 years ago generation of tech was helping small businesses automate things. But this generation, we want people to kind of, what can we do beyond automation? So what is helping to give small businesses superpowers so they can compete and grow and maybe clock off at 6 o'clock and take the dog for a walk?
Yeah, that's amazing. And how much in your role are you getting to spend time speaking to customers, and how much are you kind of working internally to develop the solutions based on feedback?
Yeah, so really trying to deeply understand customers and also note customers is a really big focus. So I think like one of the conversations about selection bias, if we ask our existing customers, we'll get one story because stories are the theme. And if we go and ask either competitors' customers or like one of our biggest competitors is like a shoebox and an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
So we go and find those people. And also some people who are currently employees, but maybe have a dream that one day they can do their own thing. So, yeah.
It's fascinating. I'm also interested in the people you're hiring. So what kind of backgrounds are they kind of coming from? And I'm just intrigued because there's a whole new generation of jobs, right?
Yeah.
People talk about AI, the robots are going to come, they're going to take our jobs.
Yeah.
But actually there's a whole new raft of new jobs being created, which I think is so exciting.
Yeah. So you mentioned like things I'm reading and things that sort of stick with us. So Tim O'Reilly, I think most people have heard of. He's been running O'Reilly and working in software for decades. And he had this great piece about a month ago about how Copilot for engineers isn't net new, it's just the latest generation of abstraction.
Yeah.
So when people were kind of building the first compilers 30 or 40 years ago, people no longer wrote machine code.
Yeah.
And so the process of building software has become more and more abstracted.
Yeah.
And so I think now that we're building AI products, it's not like there's no work for humans to do. There's just different, more complex work.
Yeah.
So when we've been interviewing for these roles, I basically say, I want somebody who has shipped and scaled an AI product. So, everybody's doing great POCs and they're really useful to learn. And we've done lots of those too, and we're going to keep doing them. But for me, I want somebody who has real world experience building, shipping and scaling. Because, and again, I spoke to a candidate this morning and said, we are going to make mistakes. It's complex, it's complicated, it's fast moving, we're going to get it wrong. Whether it's commercially, architecturally, product market fit. But we want to hire somebody who's made some mistakes, who can teach us about those mistakes, so we can make new and different ones.
Yeah.
And I think if that's, one thing I always want to tell my teams and all other teams in this space is like making mistakes is okay. But if you do it quickly, then they're cheap. And if you do it, with a small blast radius, then you're impacting your whole customer base.
Listening to you talk, I'm going to make an assumption that you're familiar with the work of Amy Edmondson around psychological safety.
Yes, yeah.
Because that's what I'm kind of hearing.
Yeah.
Her research was just really interesting. What we talked earlier about hypothesis. She had this kind of hypothesis that the best teams made the fewest mistakes. And that was her kind of PhD research, and actually she discovered the opposite, which is the best teams make the most mistakes, which is probably not strictly true, but the best teams report the most mistakes, and they learn from those mistakes. And it's how you create that culture of psychological safety to entice that stuff out, because it's going to happen. Right? And if you're not making mistakes, you're probably not pushing yourself hard enough too.
I totally agree. I think one thing we talk about, so in the team we use OKRs as like a quarterly planning kind of decision-making way of thinking about our work. And in I think it's the John Doerr book, talks about you should aim to finish the quarter with between 70 and 80% complete on your OKRs. Because if you finish them, you weren't stretching far enough.
Interesting.
And if you don't, then you didn't what you're going to learn. So there's a sweet spot about stretching yourself just enough. Yeah,
absolutely. And I've read a lot about this recently. I think Adam Grant, if you're familiar with him, he talks about saying his goals for the year, and he says, if I don't fail on at least 20% of them, I haven't pushed myself hard enough. Same kind of concept, right? I love that. So if how can I phrase this question? If you were a young person now, and I was trying not to be rude, and you were coming into this world of AI and all this opportunity, where would you, based on what you know, where would you begin?
Yeah, I think this is easy to say and hard to do, but pick something I was going to say something that's not going to change, something that's going to change more slowly. So I'm thinking, design, architecture, something that is the glue between the fast-moving pieces.
Yep.
Like understand your own passion and how that can be applied, and then have some view of like fundamental science. There's a new kind of a new algorithm, a new research approach every day, but fundamentally scientific thinking.
Yeah.
And a healthy dose of skepticism. Is this thing caused by this thing? Or design, how do humans interact with machines?
Yeah.
And how can we do that safely and responsibly and effectively? So I'd pick something where the fundamentals are more stable.
Yeah.
And then just be endlessly curious.
Yeah. Just learn, throw yourself into things and see where it can go. It's interesting, you talked there about sort of starting with something that's stable, because you know that that's going to evolve, right? Whereas something that's brand new, and you're coming in new as well, it's kind of hard to get a reference point for probably the past and the baseline.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a Gartner concept of pace layering. And in the natural world, so things like geology changes, on incredibly slow time frames, and things like, insects or leaves on trees are kind of growing really, really rapidly, and everything in between. So how take that kind of approach to like the layers within the concept.
Yeah, interesting. I also read this theory recently about move to a big city and join a big company.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be big things happening in big companies, and there's going to be opportunity to be exposed. If you really don't know what you want to do, attach yourself. You've worked for some pretty big companies. You started off at Skandia, who were big. You worked at Barclays. You worked at Deloitte. You worked at some of the big banks too. Would that kind of resonate with you, that sentiment?
Kind of.
Okay.
I think sometimes bigger organizations are slower to move.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think honestly it really depends. You're not going to do cutting edge stuff in a big stable financial services organization.
Yeah.
But you are going to have great people to work with, and you are going to have time to sort of learn with them.
Yeah.
As opposed to, a startup that only has funding to get to the next quarter. Yeah. I think it just get to know yourself and then what matters, because there's pros and cons in the big and small.
Look, you did right. I think there's knowing yourself and what works for you as well. I think it's really, really important. Some people really thrive in the ambiguity of a startup. Some people that is just insufferable, and they need the kind of structure, particularly early in their career, so they kind of find themselves as well. I've been debating a lot recently with guests about the exposure to consulting.
Yep.
It's probably a fairly good starting point out of university,
Yep.
just in terms of the exposure across industries, different skills, different functions. You're never really anywhere for too long, but it's a really good way to kind of get a reference point for what the world of work in industry looks like.
Yeah.
You kind of came into consulting a bit later.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy consulting?
I loved consulting.
Yeah.
My path into consulting was honestly working for 2 banks back to back, and then it was time for a change. And my decision really came from all the cool and exciting and innovative projects at the banks went to consulting firms.
Yeah.
So for a whole raft of different reasons, the leaders in those banks at those times didn't choose or didn't believe to give the real transformative work to their staff.
Yeah.
They brought in third parties. And so as an employee, I saw this happening again and again.
Yeah.
And honestly, my logic was, because the consultants that I had worked with were great people, really smart, really driven, and I thought I want to have them as colleagues. So I had a fantastic time in consulting, worked with some incredible people, worked with some incredible clients, just learned a lot.
Yeah, great. Do you think you ever see yourself going back to consulting at some point later in your career?
Never say never. I think the reason it was time for a change was this kind of we talk about like customer centricity and solve the problem that's there to be solved. And I think one of the challenges in consulting is, what's the phrase about, if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail?
Yeah.
And consulting sometimes gets like that after a while. We're going to sell the thing we sold last time, which is probably the right commercial model from a consultant perspective, but isn't always into the exact nuances of this customer, this context, this problem.
Yeah, interesting.
So, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. I'm going to move to the lightning round, actually, if that's okay. Just because I'm curious to learn a bit more about you. So I'm going to stand up. I'm going to put these cards out. And I'm going to ask you to pick 3 cards and then turn it over, and there'll be a question. Read the question and give us your answer.
Okay, here it goes.
Yeah.
What do you wish you knew before starting your career? There are fewer right answers than I think there are. Like, everybody's making it up as they go along.
Yeah.
I probably spent at least the first half of my career trying to chase the smartest person with the basest answer. And it took quite a while to realize that in the world of, commercial business decisions, competition, strategy, execution, there's no such thing as a right answer. There's just a right for now answer, and then go execute and learn.
And sometimes that's okay, by the way.
Yeah.
So, as in, sometimes the answer to the question just needs to continue the momentum of what's happening.
And I think it took me a long time to figure that out. So, advice for younger me.
Is that because you were a bit more of a perfectionist as a youngster, do you think? Hence
Probably.
the quest for the right answer?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Or just like, I don't know, a lack of imagination. Like, I thought there were right answers.
Yeah.
I thought such a thing existed, and it took me
As
a
in
while
the world was sort of black and white, as in there's like a definitive answer to something.
Yeah, I think I thought the world had more definitive answers than it actually does.
Yeah.
Maybe that was just a youth
Yeah. There you go. What do we got next?
These ones really are like therapy. They all like this.
No, I promise.
Some of them are like cats and
We've
dogs.
never had that
please.
question before.
Oh my goodness, coffee or tea?
There you go.
Safe. This one's easy. So coffee in the morning, tea in the afternoon.
Okay. Is that changed since you came to Australia?
I never drank English breakfast tea because I drank enough in the first 20 years of my life that I will never drink another cup. So herbal in the afternoon, coffee in the morning.
There you go. I'm just curious, is it also called English breakfast tea in Scotland?
Yes, it is.
It is.
Weirdly enough, yeah.
So I can't imagine many people drink it. But,
Yeah, that's really weird. Actually, they just call it tea.
It's called tea.
Honest,
That's right. Yeah. I think in England it's just called tea as well.
Exactly.
So it's only in the rest of the world. But, yeah.
There's only one kind of tea in the UK, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. PG sips or Twinings, I suppose.
Tetley.
It's just Tetley. There you go. We just named 3. What?
Okay. What's the one piece of sage advice you'd give to someone starting out in your field? Can we skip that? I think we did that one.
Yeah, I think we did. Pick another.
I want another lightweight one. Oh, I feel like that one. I want the easy ones. Oh my god. Can I just pick an easy one?
You just make it up.
Cats or dogs? I'm looking for the easy one. Okay. Oh, do you have any career regrets? Oh, this is a good one. Short answer is no.
Yeah.
I have had lots of luck. I think lots of luck and hard work and curiosity. I think the only thing, when I was 18, finishing school, what do I want to do? I want to do economics because, my favourite teacher in high school was the economics teacher, and I was that imaginative. And I thought, where do you do economics? Oh, I'm going to apply to London School of Economics because that's where all local economists go. And I applied and I was accepted and I didn't go. And that's probably my biggest regret, and that was 20 years ago. I think I was just too young, too scared, too far away from home, too all the things. And the fantastic thing about that story is, for the last 20-something years, every time I found myself a bit scared, I've said yes. So
There you
the regret of having such fantastic opportunity, not many people get, not taking it up, kind of bugged me quite a lot for a long time. So it's been a really good driver to do the scary things.
That's incredibly self-reflective. I think it's interesting because I think the research shows we tend to regret the things we didn't do more than the things that we did do.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean we change our behaviour. It sounds like you did. Was that maybe the momentum or the moment that made you come to Australia?
Absolutely. I mean, I did my undergrad in Glasgow, then finished and went to Skandia in Southampton, which isn't far away globally, but it was kind of leaving home.
Is this the greatest town on earth?
Absolutely. And then moving to Australia, so do the scary thing.
Yeah, amazing. What are you most proud of in your career?
Oh, my goodness. Here's a good question. I think, I don't know, I'm trying to find a way to say this that doesn't sound tremendously cheesy, but just working on some incredible things with some incredible people, and like the opportunities we've all had to learn from each other. There's like an incredible respect for people are all different fields and backgrounds, but we can all learn and contribute and build this great team and deliver this great stuff that none of us could do alone. So probably being greater than the sum of our parts.
It's a really interesting answer. It's a really consistent answer.
Oh, really?
Right. No, in a nice way. But what my reflection is listening to you say that, and you articulated it slightly differently, but the bit that people are most proud of, inevitably in a career, are the things that they did socially with other people. And they worked in teams and they collaborated and they created something. And it's probably one of my kind of things that's on my mind a lot at the moment is around the way that work's changing, hybrid working, remote working. We're kind of relying more on technology to connect and communicate with one another. And I just kind of wonder if it's the same work experience, because some of my best memories are absolutely that, coming together with a bunch of great people and smiling and having fun and working hard, and the stress and disappointment, but kind of seeing a good outcome as well. And I hope that continues to be a theme of work for people, not just a place where you spend time to pay your bills.
Yeah, absolutely. The reward is from like shared challenges and shared accomplishments.
Yeah. It's funny, actually, someone messaged me over the weekend who I haven't probably spoken to for at least 15 years. And he was actually a client, and he messaged me. And it was so funny because I'd actually been thinking about him a few weeks before, which is really weird. And I messaged that and I said, I was actually thinking about this moment that we spent some time working on something together. And he said, God, that's a blast from the past. But it's that connection, that human connection is quite powerful, I think, in what we do. As we go through our career, we're shaped by the feedback that we receive. So what would you say has been the most significant feedback you've received?
Significant. Do we mean significant? Just maybe something that really hurt to hear because it was probably true, and I've kind of taken it to heart, like you said, and reflected on it. So I consider myself a really egalitarian person. Like, I loved my time in consulting. I really don't like hierarchy. It's just kind of who I am. But I believe in teams. I believe in the power of teams. I believe in being part of a team. I've never really bought into hierarchy. So in consulting, one project, we had a habit in the morning of standing up around mid-morning, go downstairs to get coffee. Like half of Melbourne does every day. And I would stand up and be like, I'm going for coffee, who wants to come? And some people would come, some people wouldn't, change on the day, like no big deal. Fast forward 6 months, it's kind of sit down performance review time. And we've had some feedback. There's this young person in the team, and he feels really excluded because you don't ask him to go for coffee when everybody goes for coffee. And my immediate defensive reaction was, I don't ask anybody to go for coffee. Like, I literally stand on my feet and yell, across a handful of desks, I'm going for coffee, who wants to come? And this young person kind of calling out how left out they felt made me sort of question, I think I'm really inclusive, but I'm clearly not including that person. They don't feel included, therefore I'm not inclusive. And so just pausing and thinking, my style of inclusivity, like, hey, who wants to come, wasn't a style that worked for that person. They wanted to say, hey, person, do you want to join the group? And they were, some kind of quieter introvert person who didn't feel comfortable responding to a big invite and wanted a personal nudge. And on its own, that's kind of like it's a very important story for that moment.
Yeah.
But to reflect it more broadly, it's just how different styles work for different people.
Yeah.
Just being aware that groups are groups of individuals and they need different things.
And that's the hard thing sometimes as a leader, I think, is you've got so many other things to think about, and you like you kind of described, you like to think you're inclusive, but you're not thinking about the impact. And that's the other thing, as a leader, the things that you say and do have a magnified impact on the people around you as well. And it's interesting because I share probably a similar philosophy for you around hierarchy. It's never really worked for me very, very well. And that doesn't mean that I'm some sort of crazy maverick, by the way, but I kind of believe much more in the team as a style. Similar to yourself, I find myself in a position of leadership. So I'm interested, given someone that doesn't really like hierarchy, how does that make you feel as a leader?
Yeah, I think I've sort of had different feedback. Like sometimes people have said, I wish you weren't quite so involved in my work. And I have to pause and say, I promise I'm not micromanaging, I'm most curious.
Yeah.
Or being aware that different people need different styles, and my style is my style. So being really deliberate about having somebody in my team who has a different working style, who is more one-on-one relationship focused, who will make sure that young man in the office isn't left behind. So rather than thinking I have to go and tap every single person in the team on the shoulder, I know that a really successful team needs to have somebody who thinks like that, and somebody who's more, what's the Clifton Strengths thing? Activator, bias for action, whereas somebody else is bias for relationships. So just making sure there's a balance.
And that, I think that is important as a leader, by the way. I completely agree. Having the understanding your strengths. We talk often within our business about what de-energizes us and what energizes us, and kind of knowing what to lean into and what to kind of bring to the team and what to bring to the group as well. Yes, great, thank you. Final question, and I promise it's a nice one. What are you reading or listening to at the moment that you can recommend?
All the things. I think I've subscribed to the point of everything moves very quickly, so books are more or less helpful. So there's a world of Substacks and podcasts. Every weekend I try and get through 50 different Substacks. It never works. So I think maybe if I answer your question in terms of what things do I most regularly share with others, and I've got a lot of value from read or listen, there's a podcast called Beyond the Prompt about enterprise AI adoption and how to get value from this toolkit. And the man who runs that is Jeremy Iltney, and he is a Stanford innovation professor. So he has a podcast, he has a Substack, and he has a little closed WhatsApp chat. So I'm loving all of that stuff. It kind of builds on, I think everybody's been reading Ethan Mollick for innovation advice, so the guy from Wharton School. There's so many. There's some people I read for evals and ML engineering for more commercially minded people. They're, so many.
Yeah, amazing. How do you switch off?
Honestly, okay.
Apart from pictures of your dog drinking beer in the pub.
I was going to say my favourite Saturday afternoon, if we were not out of town and we were at home, There's a podcast called The Hard Fork that everybody has probably listened to. It's from the New York Times.
Okay.
And the two men who do that are hilarious. So Walking the Dog, Yarra Bend Park, for those who live in and around Melbourne, listening to that is kind of like a comedy tech podcast. So being out in nature, just anything outdoors is my happy place.
Yeah, nice. Awesome. Look, thank you for sharing today. I feel like I've learned loads, and there's probably a ton of other questions I could have had for you that wouldn't have been very interesting for other people to listen to, probably. But you've been incredibly insightful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Tales from Tech Titans, and be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcast. If you'd like to get more insights about tech careers, then check out the Ember, that's EMMBR LinkedIn page for the latest updates, articles, and engaging discussions.